Season 1 of Marvel Rivals is almost halfway over. With the second half, including The Human Torch and The Thing, releasing on February 21st, I figured it was about time that we revisit our first half of the Season 1 videos, all compiled together. I said that very weirdly, in one long video for y'all to throw me on in the background so you can get an idea of where my thoughts are for Season 1 and where I think we're headed. In this particular compilation, we're going to start with all of the character profiles since they are sort of ancillary slash anthology style and don't need to happen in a particular order. And then we're going to end off with all of my season 1 videos, finishing with the Chronovium Compendium. Thank you so much for giving it a watch. If you like the video, like the video. If you want to drop me a subscribe, that'd be great. We're continuing our climb towards 500, and I can't wait for The Thing and Johnny Storm. They're so close. Thank you all so much, and I hope you enjoy the videos. Bye! So who exactly is the Defender of Kunlun? What's up with his Swordmaster skin, and where's the sword that he has in it? And why isn't this Iron Fist Danny Rand? Let's talk about it. My name is Riddler, wrong universe, I know, and this is the Marvel Rivals character profile for the immortal Iron Fist, Lin Lie. Born in Shanghai, Lin Lie was the younger brother to a boy named Feng, both of whom are descendants of the goddess Nuwa. Their archaeologist father left Lin Lie with a mysterious sword, the purpose of which Lin Lie wouldn't know for years. Years later, the sword saves his life when a demon disguised as a mailman tries to attack Lin after he completes a magic puzzle box, referenced in his puzzle box emote. Shortly after, Baron Mordo also assails the young boy, but is driven away by Dr. Stephen Strange. The Sorcerer Supreme offers to take the sword off his hands so that people stop attacking him every other day. Lin, however, refuses, stating that the sword is his family's duty and the only clue he has to ever see his father or brother again. Instead, Lin Lie begins his martial training under a man named Ji Shuang. After his training, Lin Lie takes the moniker Swordmaster, which is where the name of the skin comes from, and joins the Agents of Atlas, the members of whom include Silk, Shang-Chi, and Luna Snow, among others. Most notably, the Agents of Atlas fight back during the invasion of symbiotes and the King in Black arc in the comics. We hear both Lin Lie and Luna Snow mention this when we play on the map Clintar. Lin Lie uses the Sword of Fuxi to help defeat and reseal the King in Black Null. After the death of Dr. Stephen Strange, don't worry, he got better, the Agents of Atlas are dispatched to try and help deal with the multiple waves of demonic incursion the absence of the Sorcerer Supreme allows. However, while on his way to Seoul to deal with a demonic Kumiho, a race of shapeshifters, the creature gets the jump on Lin Lie and bites the sword of Fuxi into pieces, sending Lin plummeting from the airplane he was riding in into the ocean. Despite the efforts of his teammates, they couldn't find Lin Lie, who was critically injured and teetering toward death near the shores of Kunlun. Kunlun is not a nation that is easily accessible. It exists within a pocket dimension that is only open to those who either know where and how to find a portal, or those who are brought to Kunlun by their fate or destiny. And as fate would have it, Lin drifted to the shores of Kunlun just as the egg of the immortal dragon Shu Lao hatched free. Generally, to become the Defender of Kunlun, you must slay the dragon and steal its heart to become the immortal Iron Fist. However, for only the second time in known history, the chi of Shu Lao was given freely, saving Lin Lie's life and making him the immortal Iron Fist. While this is the beginnings, this isn't all we know about Lin Lie. The sword of Fuxi that was bitten into pieces, Lin Lie held so tightly and dearly to his person and his soul that its fragments were actually embedded in his hands and arms. This is why, after using his dragon's defense, the block ability, you can see what looks like a blade of chi protruding from his wrist. That is because the sword of Fuxi has not left Lin Lie, it is now even more so a part of him. In the comic books, this actually proposed a bit of a problem for quite some time. While Shu Lao and Fuxi were both deities, let's say, extraplanar creatures with very powerful, very potent chi, they were already trying to mix their chi with Lin Lie's own chi. So having a third chi present, presented a pretty unique problem for Lin Lie, one that other Iron Fists have not faced exactly. It took him quite some time and quite a few teachers to learn how to do this. At first, Lin Lie was convinced that he did not need the guidance of Danny Rand or really anyone else outside of his own teachers. To him, he had completed his training. He had fought against Null, one of the most powerful beings in existence. He was the Sword Master. But eventually, Lin Lie comes around and allows Danny to teach him some of the detailed points of being a champion of Shu Lao and the defender of Kunlun. His other teachers also include Daredevil, who taught him how to fight through the pain that he was experiencing in his hands at the time. Having the embedded shards of the Sword of Fuxi stuck in his hands brought Lin Lie great pain, and that pain was breaking his concentration, making it very hard to manipulate his chi and, in general, to be a superhero. So after training with Daredevil and learning a couple of his tricks on how to be a better disabled superhero, he manages to really come into his own, but he is still missing something. Every Iron Fist who slays Shu Lao is graced with the mark of Shu Lao, a tattoo-like imprint on the skin that immediately signifies them as the immortal Iron Fist. Danny Rand had this, and the other 60 some odd defenders of Kunlun also had this, and it appeared nowhere on Lin Lie. And he couldn't exactly ask, Sho Lao where it was, because that'd be a harder conversation to have than most. That is when the story of Judgment Day comes into play. I will not be going into Judgment Day all in depth here. It is a very, very large crossover story that involves the X-Men, the Avengers, the Eternals. It is a universe-wide event that happened. And basically, there is a creature who is going through and is individually judging every member of the Marvel Universe to see, are they worthy. These trials that are presented to them are very specific. There's even an implication that the trials are pulled directly from the memories of their deepest insecurities. And due to a bit of, timey-wimey nonsense, and on top of that, just him being a trickster god, Lin Lie is actually alongside a Loki during this Judgment Day moment when it happens. His trial includes actually trying to physically fight Shu Lao, but Lin Lie struggles with this. He has always seen Shu Lao as the being that saved his life. He holds no ill will. He does not want to fight or harm Shu Lao, but everyone keeps telling him to be the immortal Iron Fist that he needs to. Lin Lie, however, is stubborn to a fault and simply takes a beating from the dragon and refuses to harm it. He sees Shu Lao, or even this projection of Shu Lao, as his friend, and he refuses to budge from that moral standpoint. And this does deem him worthy according to the creature projecting the test in the first place. And ironically enough, to show that these tests are not immaterial or all the way illusions, finally the mark of Shu Lao manifests on Lin Lie's arm. So that's the story of how Lin Lie became the immortal Iron Fist. But what is he up to in Marvel Rivals specifically? That is actually much less clear of a topic. There are four main problems that are assailing the worlds of Marvel Rivals as we have seen. There are the Dooms and the Time Stream Entanglement, the Vampire Attacks, the Web of Life and Destiny, and whatever Hydra is doing. You can also throw Null in on top of there, so I guess there are 5. Iron Fist lore section talks about none of these things. It instead shows Lin Lie meditating on how even Kunlun in its pocket dimension was not spared from the time stream entanglement. Like a lot of other dimensions, it fused together with the other heavenly cities to form the Heart of Heaven, a shrine and a shell for the Tree of Immortality. He stops a thief who steals the fruit from a tree and reveals that he stole said fruit to feed a small, pale-skinned, blue-eyed child. The thief is a man called the Prince of Orphans, who is a character that does exist in the Iron Fist mythos. He explains to Lin Lie exactly what is going on with the time stream entanglement, and that is how he is brought up to speed on everything that's going on. Eventually, Linlier determines that the man should be protected and tells the defender of the Heart of Heaven exactly that. The man accepts this explanation and gives an ominous warning before peacing out. And that's it? That's kind of all that happens. Linlier goes to train with the Prince of Orphans, which is good, and he'll certainly become stronger for it, but he kind of doesn't have anything to do with anything. There's no mention of Null. There's no mention of whatever evil eldritch entity that Hydra is trying to unleash. I mean, there's mention of it, like in the sense that there is a literal mention, but nothing material. He's not involved in the context of his story. He is totally separate from all of these things, which, to be fair, is kind of in line with how Kunlun and by proxy the Immortal Iron Fist tend to work. They tend to be pretty separate, but I mean, so does Punisher. Punisher usually isn't in the middle of things like this. So it's very interesting that they have set Linlier very much so apart from everything that is going on thus far. With that being said, I do think that is because we are going to expand on Iron Fist in the future. I think he has been set in a separate place, talking to separate people with a separate, very specific description of where he is, because we simply haven't gotten to that part of the story yet. The story of season 0 was the story of Doom and the time stream entanglement. You know, the Null things, the Hydra things, the Web of Life and Destiny, all of those things are already in the game. And the things that weren't in the game that we referenced were then quickly added to the game. Like Moon Knight and Squirrel Girl, they have stories about the vampire attacks, even in season 0 when we didn't even know about the vampire attacks yet. So I feel like Linlier has gotta follow a similar thread, right? He has to be just sort of waiting in the wings. Perhaps season 2, after we get Blade, maybe we'll go to the Heart of Heaven and we'll, tie Iron Fist into the story, and Shulao will have more of a central place to take in the events of what follows. It all remains to be seen, but that is all that I have for you. Thank you so much for enjoying and joining me. If you like the video, leave a comment down below and tell me if you have an idea. Maybe I've missed something, but Iron Fist seems pretty separate from everything, and I think it's because he's going to be doing things in the future. But until the next time I see you lovely people, drink some water, wash your hands, tell someone you love that you love them, and be good. A large chunk of people, me and my friends included, assumed that we'd get Quanon because she's kind of the quintessential version of Psylocke. And then we didn't. So let's talk about who we did get. Hi, my name is Riddler, wrong universe, I know, and this is Marvel Rivals Season 1 character profile for Psylocke. Okay, so first, before we get into the Psylocke that we did get, let's talk about the Psylocke that we thought we would get. We can start with the original rendition of the character. Psylocke was originally a woman named Betty Braddock, a British telepath that fought mostly with her telepathic abilities. Like most old-school psychics of comic books, she fought with no weapons and instead threw around purple energy beams and, told people to stop fighting. That is until she was captured by the Hand. The leader of the Hand kidnapped Betsy and had her switch bodies with his comatose lover, a woman known as Quanon. When he did this, it mentally merged and body swapped the women, meaning while Braddock didn't have explicit total physical control of her body, she did have joint mental control. And while Betsy primarily was in control of Quanon's body, there was still the underlying psyche of Quanon that always existed within Betsy. This changed a lot about the way that Betsy approached being a superhero. She suddenly took on much more ninja-like traits, as her body was trained so deeply, considering she was inhabiting the body of Quanon, by the Hand, that she essentially became an assassin. It's kind of confusing, so don't worry about it too much. Now, Quanon, on the other hand, became Psylocke after Betsy Braddock was killed by a woman named Sapphire Styx. Once Betty died and her consciousness was obviously untethered from the mortal coil, Quanon's psyche remained. And she is such a powerful telekinetic after joining minds essentially with Betsy that she telekinetically rebuilt Betsy's original body and returned her to it while taking the alias of Psylocke, returning to her original body. Betsy Braddock from this point forward becomes known as Captain or Lady Britain. And that's basically where things are right now with Quanon. Obviously, she's done things since then. It's been a few years since that happened. But she is still currently Psylocke in most continuities of Marvel Comics, except for one. Well, technically, more than one, but only one that we care about. Psylocke on Earth TRN 1033 is a woman named Psy. Psy is a wandering adventurer looking for somewhere nice to stay every night. As she mentions in the game, she has a wolf named Logan. The two come across a village dealing with a Hulkamaru, which is basically just like a wild Hulk creature or Oni, like Psylocke says in the game. She works as a peace broker between the village and Hulkamaru, who has a child and is only stealing the villagers' food to feed them, because they need to team up and slay a venomized snake named Orochi. And I explain that entire story in one paragraph because that's where it ends. That's the whole story. And that's the only story that Sai has ever appeared in. It's not very long. It's the length of one comic issue, and it's kind of just a special thing that was done a few years back to give a fun little take on Psylocke, in a black and white feudal Japan monster hunting era. But what I think is important about it is it proves beyond almost anything that Marvel Rivals is pulling even more obscure versions of characters. Obviously, we have characters like Jeff the Land Shark and Squirrel Girl, people that no one's ever really heard of, but Marvel Rivals is not limiting themselves to that. They are also pulling out obscure versions of characters that you have heard of. And I think that's important to make a distinction of because it implies to me that they are not afraid to grab a lesser known version of a character so that they fit the story, which means they care about what the story is and where it's going, which is very exciting for me. Obviously, this is like my 16th video talking about the lore of this game. I care about it more than the average person. Most people just want to shoot things, which is totally fine, by the way. So not only might we get Paste Pot Pete, but we might get a variant of Paste Pot Pete that has only appeared like once, which is cool to me. I don't know. I think it's cool. But that's Psylocke's backstory, and Psylocke's backstory, and Psylocke's backstory. But what does she get into in Marvel Rivals? Well, she's actually a member of a trio of heroes who were kidnapped by the Collector. These are three characters we haven't really talked about yet here on the channel, but Mantis, Jeff the Land Shark, and Psylocke were all taken by the Collector to serve as part of his weird-ass Art Deco fetish of exotic beings. Psylocke was kidnapped amidst the chaos of the time stream entanglement, much like Mantis and Jeff, but the three managed to link up and escape on one of the Collector's starships. The Collector, however, is a selfish man and tries to chase them down, and he almost recaptures them until they glide through space past an Akanti. First introduced in Uncanny X-Men 156 by Chris Claremont, an Akanti is a billions years old space whale with a soul so pure that it physically cannot bring itself to harm anything. However, even as this creature wails in pain, one of the two psychics reach out and ask for help. It obliges, hiding the ship within its gaping maw and saving them from the Collector. Once inside, however, Psylocke recognizes that the pain it's going through is the same pain she felt in her last Oni hunt before being captured. A massive swarm of insect-like Oni. Mantis corrects her when she calls them demons. This is actually a race of parasites called the Brood. Now, I could explain the Brood, and perhaps there is an implication made by referencing the Brood here, but I'm not going to do that until I know for sure that I need to, because that would take forever. Using the power of empathy, the trio is able to push the Hive Mind Queen and all of the Brood from the innards of the Encanti, who is so grateful that it agrees to take them back to the intergalactic empire of Wakanda, which by the way, confirms that this mantis is from this universe. So, despite not being with the Guardians of the Galaxy when they were hired by Shuri to go to Clintar, this is the mantis that would be a part of their Guardians of the Galaxy. It is not a mantis from 2024, but from 2099. And that is also the explanation for why Mantis has that super sick vibranium suit, like the skin from the Battle Pass. It is because she was hired by Wakanda to investigate things. And part of that payment, presumably, was this new suit for Mantis. Also, as a personal sign of thanks, Jeff cleans the space whale's teeth, which I think is really cute. Anyway, on the way to Wakanda, Mantis receives a distress call from the Guardians of the Galaxy because they're currently stranded on Clintar. In a similar fashion, Sai receives a psychic calling that simply says, "To me, my X-Men." Jeff decides to stick with Sai as the three begin to split and part ways, and they try and begin finding out who exactly is calling out to her. And that is what I think is probably the most interesting thing that happens in her story. Because over the years in Marvel Comics, many people have used that classic call out to assemble the mutants. But in the midst of this time stream entanglement, who is calling out for the X-Men? Is it Charles Xavier? Is it Jean Grey? Is it Emma Frost? It could be Cyclops with the help of Cerebro. We have no idea who is calling out to Psylocke or why she finds the voice familiar. Because that's very interesting when you think about it. In the one appearance of this character in the comic books, there are no X-Men. She's not in the X-Men. She's just a wandering adventurer who kills Oni. That's it. There's no like home base that she goes back to, or even the concept of mutants and mutant kind is kind of foreign to Psylocke. There are a couple of lines with Magneto in game where she has to kind of realize why she has these powers because she doesn't know. So the fact that the voice seems familiar to her, despite being a voice that she's never heard before, makes me lean toward the idea that the voice calling out to her was Jean Grey. Because while she does not know any X-Men and while she's never known any X-Men, Psylocke is very in tune with life. In her story, we see her acting as a bridge between humanity and Oni kind because she believes that life should be protected. And the Phoenix Force, the extra dimensional entity that inhabits Jean Grey, is the personification of all life that has been, is, and ever will be across the multiverse. The Phoenix Force is the totality of all life across the multiverse. That is what the Phoenix Force is, and that's why the Phoenix Force can never die. So long as there is life in existence anywhere, the Phoenix Force exists. So, if it's the Phoenix Force, it doesn't matter that she's never technically met Jean Grey because it's all the same thing. She would recognize the feeling of life, the presence of life. She would recognize that, especially with her being as powerful of a telepath and a telekinetic as she is. So that's going to be my guess, especially because we know that the Phoenix is explicitly aware of what's going on in the multiverse right now because the Phoenix Force sends Adam Warlock in his cocoon to Clintar because he knows that he's got to go there. So she helps him out. So my guess is that it's going to be Jean Grey and the Phoenix Force that is calling out to Psylocke, which I then have to assume means that Jean Grey will be in the game sooner rather than later. Back on topic though. Similar to Iron Fist, I think there is a purposeful person doing this call out, and I don't think that NetEase is leaving the answer blank to be filled in later. Even if it isn't Jean Grey, and I'm wrong about that theory, I think NetEase knows who it is. It is a definitive person who is doing this call out. I think we just haven't gotten to who it is yet or why they are assembling the X-Men. All that to say, man, We got a lot of content that is going to be added to this game in the future. You have to assume that the collector is going to appear as a villain and maybe a map, right? I mean, 3 characters are directly tied to the collector already. So you have to assume that that's going to be a thing because Hydra only has like 3 characters that mention that, and they got a whole map. So the collector's got to pop up at some point, right? Um, the "To Me My X-Men" call out implies that someone mutant and psychic is going to be added rather soon. I think the launch roadmap for this game has like 2+ years of content via plot threads in it. Like, we still haven't gotten through everyone's season 0 stuff yet. This is the season 0 stuff still that we're still going through in season 1. And every time a new character joins, we get more lore. And even then, we still have 2 lore entries for everyone that haven't been unlocked yet as of season 1. There's so much meat on this bone, and I'm loving going through it. But that's all I have for you in this video. Thank you for listening to my rambling. If you like the video, and give us a subscribe. At the time of recording this, I'm real close to 100 subs, and that would be an awesome milestone to hit before January ends. Thank you all so much for the support on these videos. They are very fun to make. And until the next time I see you, drink some water, wash your hands, tell someone you love that you love them, and be good people. So who exactly is the Defender of Kunlun? What's up with his Swordmaster skin, and where's the sword that he has in it? And why isn't this Iron Fist Danny Rand? Let's talk about it. My name is Riddler, wrong universe, I know, and this is the Marvel Rivals character profile for the immortal Iron Fist, Lin Lie. Born in Shanghai, Lin Lie was the younger brother to a boy named Feng, both of whom are descendants of the goddess Nuwa. Their archaeologist father left Lin Lie with a mysterious sword, the purpose of which Lin Lie wouldn't know for years. Years later, the sword saves his life when a demon disguised as a mailman tries to attack Lin after he completes a magic puzzle box, referenced in his puzzle box emote. Shortly after, Baron Mordo also assails the young boy, but is driven away by Dr. Stephen Strange. The Sorcerer Supreme offers to take the sword off his hands so that people stop attacking him every other day. Lin, however, refuses, stating that the sword is his family's duty and the only clue he has to ever see his father or brother again. Instead, Lin Lie begins his martial training under a man named Ji Shuang. After his training, Lin Lie takes the moniker Swordmaster, which is where the name of the skin comes from, and joins the Agents of Atlas, the members of whom include Silk, Shang-Chi, and Luna Snow, among others. Most notably, the Agents of Atlas fight back during the invasion of symbiotes and the King in Black arc in the comics. We hear both Lin Lie and Luna Snow mention this when we play on the map Clintar. Lin Lie uses the Sword of Fuxi to help defeat and reseal the King in Black Null. After the death of Dr. Stephen Strange, don't worry, he got better, the Agents of Atlas are dispatched to try and help deal with the multiple waves of demonic incursion the absence of the Sorcerer Supreme allows. However, while on his way to Seoul to deal with a demonic Kumiho, a race of shapeshifters, the creature gets the jump on Lin Lie and bites the sword of Fuxi into pieces, sending Lin plummeting from the airplane he was riding in into the ocean. Despite the efforts of his teammates, they couldn't find Lin Lie, who was critically injured and teetering toward death near the shores of Kunlun. Kunlun is not a nation that is easily accessible. It exists within a pocket dimension that is only open to those who either know where and how to find a portal, or those who are brought to Kunlun by their fate or destiny. And as fate would have it, Lin drifted to the shores of Kunlun just as the egg of the immortal dragon Shu Lao hatched free. Generally, to become the Defender of Kunlun, you must slay the dragon and steal its heart to become the immortal Iron Fist. However, for only the second time in known history, the chi of Shu Lao was given freely, saving Lin Lie's life and making him the immortal Iron Fist. While this is the beginnings, this isn't all we know about Lin Lie. The sword of Fuxi that was bitten into pieces, Lin Lie held so tightly and dearly to his person and his soul that its fragments were actually embedded in his hands and arms. This is why, after using his Dragon's Defense, the block ability, you can see what looks like a blade of chi protruding from his wrist. That is because the Sword of Fuxi has not left Linlier, it is now even more so a part of him. In the comic books, this actually proposed a bit of a problem for quite some time. While Shu Lao and Fuxi were both deities, let's say, extraplanar creatures with very powerful, very potent chi, they were already trying to mix their chi with Lin Lie's own chi. So having a third chi present, presented a pretty unique problem for Lin Lie, one that other Iron Fists have not faced exactly. It took him quite some time and quite a few teachers to learn how to do this. At first, Lin Lie was convinced that he did not need the guidance of Danny Rand or really anyone else outside of his own teachers. To him, he had completed his training. He had fought against Null, one of the most powerful beings in existence. He was the Sword Master. But eventually, Lin Lie comes around and allows Danny to teach him some of the detailed points of being a champion of Shu Lao and the defender of Kunlun. His other teachers also include Daredevil, who taught him how to fight through the pain that he was experiencing in his hands at the time. Having the embedded shards of the Sword of Fuxi stuck in his hands brought Lin Lie great pain, and that pain was breaking his concentration, making it very hard to manipulate his chi and, in general, to be a superhero. So after training with Daredevil and learning a couple of his tricks on how to be a better disabled superhero, he manages to really come into his own, but he is still missing something. Every Iron Fist who slays Shu Lao is graced with the mark of Shu Lao, a tattoo-like imprint on the skin that immediately signifies them as the immortal Iron Fist. Danny Rand had this, and the other 60 some odd defenders of Kunlun also had this, and it appeared nowhere on Lin Lie. And he couldn't exactly ask, Shu Lao where it was, because that'd be a harder conversation to have than most. That is when the story of Judgment Day comes into play. I will not be going into Judgment Day all in depth here. It is a very, very large crossover story that involves the X-Men, the Avengers, the Eternals. It is a universe-wide event that happened. And basically, there is a creature who is going through and is individually judging every member of the Marvel Universe to see, are they worthy. These trials that are presented to them are very specific. There's even an implication that the trials are pulled directly from the memories of their deepest insecurities. And due to a bit of, timey-wimey nonsense, and on top of that, just him being a trickster god, Lin Lie is actually alongside a Loki during this Judgment Day moment when it happens. His trial includes actually trying to physically fight Shu Lao, but Lin Lie struggles with this. He has always seen Shu Lao as the being that saved his life. He holds no ill will. He does not want to fight or harm Shu Lao, but everyone keeps telling him to be the immortal Iron Fist that he needs to. Lin Lie, however, is stubborn to a fault and simply takes a beating from the dragon and refuses to harm it. He sees Shu Lao, or even this projection of Shu Lao, as his friend, and he refuses to budge from that moral standpoint. And this does deem him worthy according to the creature projecting the test in the first place. And ironically enough, to show that these tests are not immaterial or all the way illusions, finally, the mark of Shu Lao manifests on Lin Lie's arm. So that's the story of how Lin Lie became the immortal Iron Fist. But what is he up to in Marvel Rivals specifically? That is actually much less clear of a topic. There are four main problems that are assailing the worlds of Marvel Rivals as we have seen. There are the Dooms and the Time Stream Entanglement, the Vampire Attacks, the Web of Life and Destiny, and whatever Hydra is doing. You can also throw Null in on top of there, so I guess there are 5. Iron Fist lore section talks about none of these things. It instead shows Linlier meditating on how even Kunlun in its pocket dimension was not spared from the time stream entanglement. Like a lot of other dimensions, it fused together with the other heavenly cities to form the Heart of Heaven, a shrine and a shell for the Tree of Immortality. He stops a thief who steals the fruit from a tree and reveals that he stole said fruit to feed a small, pale skinned, blue eyed child. The thief is a man called the Prince of Orphans, who is a character that does exist in the Iron Fist mythos. He explains to Linlier exactly what is going on with the time stream entanglement, and that is how he is brought up to speed on everything that's going on. Eventually, Linlier determines that the man should be protected and tells the defender of the Heart of Heaven exactly that. The man accepts this explanation and gives an ominous warning before peacing out. And that's it? That's kind of all that happens. Linlier goes to train with the Prince of Orphans, which is good, and he'll certainly become stronger for it, but he kind of doesn't have anything to do with anything. There's no mention of Null. There's no mention of whatever evil eldritch entity that Hydra is trying to unleash. I mean, there's mention of it, like in the sense that there is a literal mention, but nothing material. He's not involved in the context of his story. He is totally separate from all of these things, which, to be fair, is kind of in line with how Kunlun and by proxy the Immortal Iron Fist tend to work. They tend to be pretty separate, but I mean, so does Punisher. Punisher usually isn't in the middle of things like this. So it's very interesting that they have set Linlier very much so apart from everything that is going on thus far. With that being said, I do think that is because we are going to expand on Iron Fist in the future. I think he has been set in a separate place, talking to separate people with a separate, very specific description of where he is, because we simply haven't gotten to that part of the story yet. The story of Season 0 was the story of Doom and the Time Stream entanglement. You know, the Null things, the Hydra things, the Web of Life and Destiny, all of those things are already in the game. And the things that weren't in the game that we referenced were then quickly added to the game. Like Moon Knight and Squirrel Girl, they have stories about the vampire attacks, even in Season 0 when we didn't even know about the vampire attacks yet. So I feel like Linlier has gotta follow a similar thread, right? He has to be just sort of waiting in the wings. Perhaps Season 2, after we get Blade, maybe we'll go to the Heart of Heaven and we'll, tie Iron Fist into the story, and Shulao will have more of a central place to take in the events of what follows. It all remains to be seen, but that is all that I have for you. Thank you so much for enjoying and joining me. If you like the video, leave a comment down below and tell me if you have an idea. Maybe I've missed something, but Iron Fist seems pretty separate from everything, and I think it's because he's going to be doing things in the future. But until the next time I see you lovely people, drink some water, wash your hands, tell someone you love that you love them, and be good people. Who is Darkchild? Why does Magic name drop Limbo every 11 seconds? And is she technically the Sorcerer Supreme? Let's talk about it. My name is the Riddler. Wrong universe, I know. And welcome to the first Marvel Rivals character profile for Magic, the Queen of Limbo. So let's start with the basics that, as far as we know, remain to be true from the comics into Marvel Rivals. Ilyana Rasputina, also known as Magic, is a Russian-born mutant whose X gene gives her the ability to travel through portals that she calls stepping discs. When she was a young child, she was kidnapped by an evil sorcerer who drug her to a hell-like dimension called Limbo. The trauma of this event caused her X gene to activate at only the age of 6. Quick lesson about X genes: most mutants have their abilities awaken when they begin the process of puberty. However, intense traumatic moments can activate it early, which is exactly what happened to Ilyana. After the X-Men, including Kitty Pryde, try and rescue the young mutants, things go awry and Ilyana is stuck in limbo essentially for what on Earth is a few moments, but we find out that in limbo, it is a few years. This is important. Keep that information in your mind. 7 years, in fact, to be exact. In a matter of minutes, that time passes on Earth. While stuck in limbo, Ilyana manipulates her own life force to create the Soul Sword. By the time she returns to Earth, she is a fledgling mage in her own right due to having to use and adapt to magic naturally to survive in limbo. However, she returns to Earth noticing one particular issue. Her magic on Earth is nowhere near as potent as it is in Limbo. This leads to a couple of different problems. While Ilyana can still summon her stepping discs, they are nowhere near as powerful as they were when they served her in Limbo. In addition to that, Ilyana struggles to understand how the magic of Earth even functions. See, the plane of Limbo is a dark aligned plane, so thusly you use dark magic when manipulating the natural magic in the plane of Limbo. This is the magic that Ilyana is used to. It is a magic that is tempered by rage, sadness, emotion. So she has learned to control her emotions in order to control magic in Limbo. The magic of Earth, however, is not so simple. It is a freakish combination of both dark and light magic due to the constant old ones and the dark old ones who fight over the material plane of Earth. Professor X, being an expert, get it, in mutant physiology and psychology, doesn't really know anything about sorcery. So, while he can help Ilyana learn to manipulate her stepping discs, which are a very important thing, he can't help her learn how to better manipulate the magic on Earth. While they look for a teacher, Ilyana continues to hone her skills of her own accord, eventually becoming so powerful and well known by the demons of Limbo, which she still frequently goes to train herself, that those demons actually crown her the Queen of Limbo. However, spending so much time in the dimension of demons and wielding her literal soul as a blade while training has, as she says in the game, blended her soul a bit with the plane of Limbo. And this has led to the formation of Ilyana's id, Darkchild. Now, there are a lot of different comic book moments with Darkchild. I'm sure someone will leave a comment down below telling me how I'm totally wrong about Darkchild, but what I remember from the Young Mutants comics that I read is that Darkchild is essentially Ilyana's darker half. Darkchild is the culmination of the dark emotions that magic has sort of forced together and sometimes weaponizes when she's trying to fight and survive in Limbo. There are times of extreme stress and pressure and just general trauma where Dark's child actually steps forth, kind of like how the Hulk works for Bruce Banner. And similarly, Darkchild is much more strong and much more potent than magic, but Darkchild is also a creature of pure instinct and total savagery. So, very, very dangerous, not something that she actively tries to do basically ever. It's really a last resort. Darkchild has even less regard for the lives and well being of basically anyone and anything than the already cold and pragmatic Ilyana. After a lot of comic book shenanigans, Ilyana decides that she does need better mastery over her magic to best serve both Earth as an X-Man and Limbo as its ruler. She eventually sought out one Dr. Stephen Strange. Strange was in awe of her latent magical abilities. Magic's stepping discs are not just short-range teleports. They're not even just long-range teleports. Ilyana's discs are potent enough that she can teleport through time. She can teleport through time. So the next time that a magic survives something by like portaling 4 inches when you're playing Marvel Rivals, it's actually not bullshit. It could be way more bullshit than it is. Her portals are ridiculously powerful. The caveat to that power, however, is the further she goes and the less she knows about where she's going, the, let's say, wilder her teleportations get. In fact, this is actually how her team up with Black Panther and Psylocke works in the game. She grants them a mote of her power and it allows them to reverse time, restoring their HP. Magic is, in fact, so powerful a sorcerer when inhabiting her home plane of limbo that she is the Sorcerer Supreme of the plane of limbo. Because the title Sorcerer Supreme is given out by dimension. So while Stephen Strange is the Sorcerer Supreme of our dimension, technically it's currently Clea Strange, but each plane has a different Sorcerer Supreme. The Scarlet Witch that appears in Marvel Rivals, for example, is the Sorcerer Supreme of her dimension. That's why Stephen Strange reaches out to her in the first place. So now that the basics are out of the way, let's wrap up by talking about a couple of things that remain to be seen in Marvel Rivals. In the comic books, the Soul Sword is not only her weapon, but it is also her crown. Whoever wields the Soul Sword is recognized as the ruler of the dimension of Limbo. This is basically because the demons recognize that Ilyana is probably dead if anyone else rolls up wielding her sword. So they're the queen if they killed the previous queen, because Limbo is that kind of dimension. Her soul sword also traditionally cannot harm mundane creatures or objects. It just passes through them. So I wonder if Chronovium and the time stream entanglement has made everyone just a little magical, whether they know it or not, which actually might explain a few things. But that's for another video. Let's move on to the meme question, right? Why does magic bring up Limbo so often? I admittedly didn't even notice this until the internet started talking about it a lot, but she does bring it up like every other voice line or so, so fair game, I guess. I think based on the lore of her in game, the best guess I could give you is probably that we know time passes differently in Limbo. So when you stack the time stream entanglement on top of that, I think Ilyana has just been in limbo for a very long time. She kind of doesn't have anything else to talk about. If she's been in limbo for as long as Krakoa got hurtled through the time stream, Ilyana hasn't experienced anything besides limbo in possibly like hundreds of years. So I think maybe we could cut her some slack for only having one thing to talk about. It's kind of like when you have that friend who's going to college and you live in a small town and all they can talk about is all the stuff they did while they were at college. It's like, well, that's all they've been doing. So I don't know. It's not that big a deal. Who really cares? She kind of doesn't have anything else to talk about though. I mean, obviously the real answer is there's only so many voice lines because it's a video game, so you're gonna hear the same lines a lot. But that's all I have for you today. If you like this video, like the video. Do you think we'll be seeing Ilyana's brother, Pitor, aka Colossus, in game? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for joining me. I plan to be doing a lot of these, and I'm gonna start with the characters that we have the most questions about. Next up, I have someone in particular who is just chock full of interesting lore bits. Until the next time I see you, drink some water, wash your hands, tell someone you love that you love them. So, what does Krakoa look like in the midst of the time stream entanglement? Is Magneto in charge of everything? And just who gave Magneto the ability to communicate across planes of existence? Let's talk about it. My name is the Riddler, wrong universe, I know, and this is Marvel Rivals Season 1 character profile for the Master of Magnetism, Magneto. So, let's start with a good point made by a commenter. In my last video about Psylocke, I go on like a 2-minute rant about who possibly could have reached out to her in the far reaches of space, and I talk about Jean Grey and Professor X and a bunch of theories and things that I mention. A very helpful commenter, who I pinned in that video, was just like, I mean, did you read Magneto's story? And I can't lie to y'all, I was like, oh yeah, right. That it does say that. So long story short, Magneto is the one to reach out to Psylocke. Very good catch. I encourage y'all to do that, by the way. If I say something wrong or pose a question like that has a very clear answer that I've forgotten about, Feel free to answer or correct me. I have read everything that is in the game, but there's a lot of things to read in the game. So things that are not immediately memorable to me tend to end up slid to the wayside. And I can forget about things. It happens. Thank you. But all of that brings me to today's video. Magneto, as I'm sure you all are aware, considering he's one of the more popular members slash enemies of the X-Men, is not a telekinetic. So how exactly does he reach out to Psylocke way in the middle of nowhere? Well, not nowhere specifically, because nowhere is a place, but the far reaches of space, wherever she is after helping out the space whale. In order to answer that, we actually have to turn the clock back ever so slightly. In Magic's story, she's approached by both Wolverine and Scarlet Witch to save a young mutant girl who got trapped in limbo when things went screwy with the time stream entanglement, much like Illyana did herself when she was a child. After they find that girl, Logan does what mutants always have since its founding and takes her to Krakoa, where Magneto is musing to Storm about the predicament Krakoa has found itself in. See, while Krakoa is currently in 2099, and this is the same Wolverine that we have seen in the stories before, working with Cap, working with Widow, etc., Krakoa, both the land and its denizens, are from 2024. They are from the timeline with the 2024 Doom. However, the time stream entanglement threw them essentially into the future. It flung them all the way to 2099. And the time string entanglement also seems to flow in some ways like a river or an act of nature, and Storm was able to handle it, so they landed safely. Now, that is a massive understatement of the weight of what Storm does to save Krakoa, but we are going to go more in depth on that in the next video. Obviously, as a safe haven for mutants of all ages, there are a lot of disheveled children that Storm and Magnus are both trying to help out. That is when the trio of Magic, Wolverine, and Wanda arrive with the young mutant girl in tow. After a heartfelt reunion, Scarlet Witch tells everyone that they cannot just sit in their respective dimensions hoping to not die and holding things together by a thread. They need to work together, an idea she got from helping out Stephen Strange from one Sorcerer Supreme to another. Magneto doesn't really like the concept of helping humans for several very legitimate reasons, but even he must agree only if the terms are beneficial on both sides. He wants to continue Krakoa's true goal and his life's work, providing a safe and nourishing place for the existence of all of mutant kind. So he removes his classic helmet, which you can still see in the Master of Magnetism skin, and crafts a Cerebro from scratch in about 5 seconds. Once again, the lore moments in this game give me so much hope as a comic book fan. We talk about how incredibly powerful Adam Warlock is. We talk about how incredibly powerful Magneto is. These people have such fine-tuned control of their powers. It's that old comic book trope, right? Where it's like, there's no point in power scaling in comics because in some fuck-off what-if issue from 30 years ago, you know, they said Scarlet Witch can casually move nebulas or whatever. Like, the powers just get so wild that it's hard to really picture how that functions in a video game. In fact, I've been working on a little bit of a theory, if you will, on how exactly Marvel Rivals works diegetically, of course. Because if you really think about it, with the way that most of these characters work, the Punisher should not be able to kill Storm under any circumstances, right? And obviously, the reason they can is because you can't do power scaling like that, otherwise the video game doesn't work. But diegetically, I think that Storm's story actually gives us a very helpful clue into why in-universe these fights and encounters are so close. And, say it with me, kids, what's the reason? Chronovium! Yay! We haven't talked about it in quite some time, but I do think that Chronovium has a lot to do with how these battles are working and taking place. But we will talk about that more in a separate video. This video is still about Magneto. So, after he creates Cerebro from scratch in 5 seconds, like I said, Wanda proceeds to enhance Cerebro with her magics, opening Cerebro to interdimensional use. And during his first usage, he sees a couple of interesting things. He sees what he describes as a golden light trying to burn out the darkness, as well as a king of the seas preparing to strike at the surface, a nod to Namor and Luna Snow's current going on story, and thousands of more before he finally sees a telepathic ninja trapped in a strange world of unholy amusements. Now, I am a little split on what exactly this means, because to my knowledge, while it was highly suggested at the time, I think this is the first confirmation of Adam Warlock being a mutant. Because Adam Warlock is not a mutant in the way that you think of like Scott Summers or Bobby Drake or, even Colossus. Adam Warlock is a mutant among his race. He is a mutant among his race. Despite not having an explicit X gene, he's considered a mutant by his people. So the upgrade of Scarlet Witch's magic on Cerebro has expanded Cerebro to account for not only mutants that have X genes, but even a step further to that. If you are a mutant of your race, Magneto's new Cerebro can reach out to you telepathically. So it's sort of like exponentially increased the power of Cerebro, because the way Cerebro originally worked is that Xavier and Jean Grey and whatever other telepaths could use it almost as like a conduit to project their own powers out through the connection of an X gene. Magneto doesn't have telekinesis or telepathy. He does have telekinesis technically. Magneto does not have telepathy. He does not have that power. He does not have that ability. That is part of Scarlet Witch's magic. And since it is not amplifying his own X gene powered telepathy, it seems like it has expanded beyond those constraints and can kind of reach out to anyone who is considered a mutant of any kind. And I think, who's ready for the crazy theory? I think this is how we get the Inhumans. I think this is how we get the Inhumans, because Inhumans have always been so close, but technically different than the mutants in the comics, much to Marvel's disapproval. Marvel has tried several times to write out and get rid of the Inhumans, and for some reason they just don't. They just keep making stories with the Inhumans in them, and I don't understand why. But like Miss Marvel was turned into a mutant from being an Inhuman. They're very close, almost to the point of being the same thing, but they aren't. There are things that affect mutants that don't affect Inhumans. Things like the Terrigen Mist and stuff like that. They are different. But with Wanda's upgrades to Cerebro, they might be close enough that it doesn't matter anymore. But once again, like I've said like 3 times this video, that is a theory for another day. Thank you all so much for listening to this character profile for Magneto, the Master of Magnetism. If you like the video, like the video. If I said something wrong, call me out on it in the comments, or if you want to just tell me I'm having a great time here, then go ahead and do that too. Make sure you subscribe. We're so close to 100 subscribers, which is fucking awesome. I went from having like 10 or 20 subscribers at the start of January, and January is ending today, and I've got almost 100. That's incredible to me. And I appreciate you all so much for sticking around. I know there are a lot of different places that have started doing the lore of Marvel Rivals, and I'm so thankful that you're still kicking it around here with me. I'll keep the videos coming. Like I said, I've got that Chronovium theory to sort of explain what's going on. Storm will probably be the next video, which I might drop a little early. Maybe I'll drop that one on Saturday. Who knows? But thank you all so much for joining me. And until the next time I see you, drink some water, wash your hands, tell someone you love that you love them, and be good people. Storm is probably one of the most well known designations of mutant. For a lot of people who are casual comic enjoyers, she is the Omega level mutant. But how does that stack up in a world that's laced with Chronovium? If Chronovium can make mortals and bullets strong enough to put down Asgardians with ease, does Omega level mutant really mean that much? Or is Storm outpaced in this new environment? Spoiler alert, no. No, she is not. Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Riddler, wrong universe, I know, and this is Marvel Rivals Season 1 character profile for Aurora Monroe, aka Storm. So, when it comes to Storm, there are a few people quite as well known and powered as her. On top of being one of the most classic X Men, she's also seemingly endlessly powerful and forgiving. Marvel Rivals stays true to this in its depiction of her. Storm is naturally gifted by her X gene to feel even the tiniest swirls and changes in the environment. However, Storm is also a very busy woman. She is sitting on the Quiet Council of Krakoa and the Great Ring of Araco. The Quiet Council is probably easy for you to assume what exactly it is. It's the silent but ruling party of the mutants on Krakoa, comprised mostly of X-Men that lead Krakoa as a nation and act as its governing body. Araco is actually quite the same. For those who don't know, Krakoa is a living island, and much like its cousins that it allows to live on its surface, Krakoa is a mutant. And Krakoa, being a mutant island, is actually a large reason why mutants are so safe there. But Krakoa was not the only living mutant island. It essentially had a twin named Araco that broke off of it in sort of a Pangea situation. Due to some meddling and nefariousness from Apocalypse that we won't get into here, Araco ended up on Mars with a large chunk of the quote-unquote original mutant population. Through a dicey chain of events, Storm found herself on Mars with these mutants, and eventually, like most mutant communities, they elect the goddess to be one of their ruling bodies. All of that to say, Storm is very busy when the time stream entanglement happens, but eventually the disaster takes precedence over bureaucracy. From Storm's perspective, we get to see the time stream entanglement splinter reality. Trees grow hundreds of feet tall, insects move through millions of lifespans in the time it takes her to exhale. The stars in the sky shift so dramatically that she doesn't recognize them. Plants all around her grow, bloom, and die in an instant. And then, a pretty important bit, if you ask me, Storm sees Araco and Krakoa appear before her almost as if they are molding into each other, overlapping and hybridizing. Storm then notes another thing. The harder the wind seems to blow, the faster things seem to transform. She even spots tiny slivers of a strange material that, when they collide with her, seem to hinder her ability to locate herself in space and time. Then Storm has a realization. This is a storm. A hailstorm, a maelstrom on a galactic warping level, but that means nothing to Aurora Monroe. No matter the size, no matter the ferocity, if this was a storm, it would bend to her will just like all the rest of the storms. Guided by her well-trained instinct, Storm reaches out and feels the pain and fear in both Araco and Krakoa as the twin islands meld together. Storm then feels how this time storm is twisting and bending together reality itself, and for a moment, she understands the mechanics of how that's happening. And in the same way that electricity crackles around her body in the atmosphere when she wills it, so too does space and time. And as it does, she feels a million different versions of herself from a million different realities, but they do not even faze her. She had understood this storm, and that meant her control of it was a matter of diligence. As she began to quiet it, she also understood the boundaries of her storm may be beyond her total control. But over this one small part of Krakoa and Araco, she could and would exert her influence. She began to guide both Krakoa and Araco through the currents of the storm and thusly through time. Gradually, she channels the time storm, and until the two islands are separated. As they do separate, Storm watches more of these strange crystals fall to the ground across the island's surface. In the ensuing chaos, the two places had gotten so mixed together that Storm was no longer on Mars/Arakko. She was once again on the island of Krakoa. Storm then thinks a flurry of questions. How did she get teleported between planets? Was Arakko even okay? Was this the right timeline to be in? And who in the hell caused that storm? She even muses that when in the eye of the Tempest, it may have been more powerful than her contact with the Phoenix Force. I'm going to say that again. Storm says it may have been more powerful than her contact with the Phoenix Force. I've mentioned the Phoenix Force a couple of times, and I think people would probably know it best as being an entity that is hosted inside of Jean Grey. But if you don't know what exactly the Phoenix Force is, it is the totality of life energy across the multiverse. That means their universe, the MCU, the DC universe, our universe. The Phoenix Force is representative of all of the life energy across everything. It is the collection of the collective life energy. And Storm feels the time string entanglement and goes, that might have been stronger than the Phoenix Force. That is insanity. I cannot overstate what that implies. And Storm does not strike me as the type of person. I mean, she could be wrong, I suppose, but she probably isn't, right? Like, she probably knows what the hell she's talking about. And if you continue to think about it along that train of thought, we have seen Loki get a power up from Cronovium. We've seen Hela get a power up from Cronovium. We've seen Thor and Mjolnir get power ups from Cronovium. This shit is so strong. It's so powerful. It's so potent. And I think as the story continues, it's just going to get more and more and more obvious. And I'm personally waiting for like Cronovium poisoning or something like that, you know what I mean? Because as Storm does realize the flakes of crystals that lay thick on the ground like a mineral made of time, she doesn't know what this is, but we know for sure that it's Cronovium. And implicitly, since we had that scene earlier in her story in the midst of the storm, how the tiny slivers of material were hitting her skin and dissipating, and they were making it hard for her to place where she was in time and space. It kind of messed with her senses, but it dissipated as it hit her. And I think this is when Cronovium like infused in Storm. I think it has bled into her. It has almost certainly affected her X gene and almost certainly affected her powers. And I feel like it is a fair leap in logic to assume that this is how it worked for everybody. Everyone who was embroiled in the time stream entanglement, even if they, didn't know how to get themselves out of it, like how Storm did, they probably got infused with Cronovium at that moment. Because when Thor is captured by Loki and he calls Mjolnir to him, he is surprised to see that Mjolnir is laced with Cronovium. So it's not that like this is an active process, it just happens and suddenly these things have Cronovium in them. And I think through Storm's story, we see what it looks like when that happens. But back on topic, back to Storm. There's only a little bit left. She then decides that both Xavier and Magneto need to be briefed on whatever the hell just happened. But Xavier should probably know first if Storm can find him. So that was wild as hell. That's her whole story, right? I cannot wait until we get more X-Men so we can get more story on what the hell is going on Krakoa and on Arakko. I think that this story makes a very specific reference to the idea that people from Arakko could also now be on Krakoa and vice versa. And on top of that, Storm says that she wants to tell Xavier first, but the next time we see her in the lore chapters is in Magneto's chapter, and they're on Krakoa. So did she find Magneto first? Have they found Xavier off screen and managed to talk to him, or do they just not know where Charles is? He could be on Araco. I've been thinking we'll get a Krakoa map. Maybe we'll get an Araco map. I don't even know at this point. On top of that, we explicitly get that scene of Cronovium in its most volatile form during the midst of the storm, and it hits like rain hitting a sponge. So one would have to assume, similar to Loki and Thor and Hela on Yggdrasil, that this infused Storm with even more power and more Cronovium. So who knows what the upper limits of Storm's powers are right now? Because they were already astronomical, right? But she's got to be even stronger now because she's basically got soaked in a Cronovium hailstorm. But this is leaning real hard into my ever-growing theory of how Cronovium is working and how this game is working. But all of those things are admittedly for a different video. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me. If you like the video, and maybe think about dropping a subscribe if you've been around for the past couple of videos. We just recently hit over 100 subscribers, which is amazing to me. All of this progress on this channel is coming from January. It's just coming from January, and it's coming from Marvel Rivals. I've gone from like 6 subscribers to 100, and I know there are a lot of YouTubers out there with way more, but that's super fucking exciting for me. I appreciate it so much. I'm loving going through this game, and I'm so glad that you all are enjoying it, and hopefully you stick around. So maybe drop a comment, drop a subscribe. Let's fucking chat, dude. This game's cool, and I'm really glad to be going through it. And until the next time that I see all of you lovely people, drink some water, wash your hands, tell someone you love that you love them, and be good people. Marvel Rivals Season 1 has started. And while most of the known universe is having a blast with gameplay videos galore, you, my friend, have found yourself in the one-stop shop for Marvel Rivals lore. In today's video, we're going to go over how all these goddamn vampires came from out of nowhere, and also what heroes are even left to stop them at this point. My name is The Riddler, wrong universe, I know, and this is Marvel Rivals Season 1 of Marvel Rivals: Eternal Darkness. We start in the Divine Plane, where Khonshu is talking to Mark Spector, the Moon Knight. Having pulled him in rather abruptly, Khonshu asks what Mark knows of vampires. Outside of Dracula owing him money, Mark doesn't seem to know much. Khonshu is the protector of travelers in the night through his fists of Khonshu, of course, and vampires are essentially Khonshu's natural enemy, considering they can only function while his moon hangs in the sky due to their curse. Their conversation is interjected, however, by the king and defender of Latveria, Victor Von Doom. Khonshu and Moon Knight immediately jump onto the defense, understandably, but he has come to impart a warning. Dracula seeks to end daylight itself, and Khonshu calls off Moon Knight, allowing Doom to speak. Doom begins his tale, one that regales the origins of vampires, a race of humanoids born from an ancient curse inscribed within the Darkhold, written in the blood of the first of their kind, a vampire named Varney. Those vampiric verses, as they're called, also granted them immortal life. As we've talked about before, Doom also believes that this immortal life is the key to unlocking the nature of time itself. Doom, never being able to take responsibility for literally anything he has ever done, blames the Sorcerer Supreme for hiding the Darkhold from him. And then we get to exactly what Doom wants from Khonshu. He wants the moon god to hold the moon in place, shrouding a single city in eternal night to give Doom the chance to unlock the secrets of the vampires. Mark scoffs at this, thinking Doom must have lost his mind. Doom, being Doom, is once again like, nah, this is a great plan. And Khonshu is very against this plan, as it would endanger countless travelers of the night. Doom is incensed by this refusal, but despite all his power and rage, Victor is not a god, and Khonshu easily banishes him from his plane of existence. Doom, however, shouts that Doom will have what he wishes, very defiantly. Khonshu then comes to an abrupt decision. He decides that he needs the Darkhold, actually. The same book that made the vampires may contain a fix for Dracula's plan. Within the Book of Sins, there is a spell called the Montesi Formula that could take their gift away permanently. Moon Knight argues that this type of thing should be Blade's job, and Khonshu doesn't disagree, but Blade isn't the damn fist of Khonshu. We then switch our perspective to Tyrone Johnson and Tandy Bowen. Vampires have begun to pour out of New York, Manhattan specifically, and the duo supers are doing their best to protect people. Cloak is currently the one on the material plane, and as he drags three vampires into the pitch black void that is the Dark Force dimension, Dagger reminds Cloak that vampires like the dark, much to his annoyance. Cloak and Dagger assume that whatever spell has hung the moon permanently in the sky seems to have banished Dagger's physical form to the Dark Force dimension. After consulting with Reed Richards, however, they realize it was actually the time stream entanglement that they saw. Reed surmises that since Cloak and Dagger tried to portal between dimensions as a defensive measure when it happened, they had somehow gotten entangled with each other on a molecular level. Reed ran many tests, but nothing is fruitful as of yet, so they just had to do the best they could. Originally, Cloak was more aggressive and actively trying to take down the people under Dracula's sway, while Tandy wanted to heal them, but as time went on, it seems the roles ended up reversed. This reversal makes Cloak worried about his usually stalwart, light-focused friend, but he suppresses these worries. The duo is called up by Mr. Fantastic, who explains that a test run of his time reintegration device may not only help their experiments, but it might also fix Cloak and Dagger's predicament. And it does. Kinda. While they both are physically around now, their energy signatures still seem deeply intertwined. Reed warns them that teleporting around using Cloak's powers will increase the chance that they are refused. Cloak is deeply disheartened, since that's kind of his whole thing, but Dagger is just ecstatic to have a body again. It appears, however, that she is not emotionally repaired from whatever has been leading her down a darker path. Eventually, in one of the many situations with vampires going on, Cloak is forced to teleport them away, refusing the two. But Cloak and Dagger are not the only ones who are fighting off these vampires. We switch perspectives to Spider-Man, who is also defending the people of Manhattan from vampires, as we've mentioned in other videos. Spider-Zero reaches out to Peter around this time, who declines given how fucking destroyed New York is right now. After his refusal, Johnny Storm comes to find him and tell him the good news. Squirrel Girl's team has finally found Blade. Peter breathes a sigh of relief, as his expertise would be very useful in this vampire-focused situation. Blade explains that he was busy trying to figure out how the hell Dracula even pulled this all off. He says he has a lead, but it's hard to believe. After they take turns beating down a few vampires, Spider-Man's spider sense hits overdrive as the trio are beset by Dracula himself. After a bit of combat, Dracula gets the better of Peter, though before he can bite him, Blade jumps in between to protect him. The King of Vampires turns into a giant bat and knocks both Peter and Johnny Storm out before dragging Blade, the only vampire able to walk in the daylight, deep within his castle to try and find a cure for the rest of the vampire's moon-binding curse. And that's everything we know about how all this vampire business started, and it also lets you know what our goal is in Season 1. In the Manhattan maps, when we are driving around with Herbie in the Fantastic Four, we are trying to scan the pages of the Darkhold to find the Montesi formula, because Khonshu believes that this will help them. Doctor Strange also probably isn't happy that the pages of the book he tried very hard to hide are now just fluttering around New York. That's super not good. And our second goal, one that we haven't gotten to in game yet, is we are trying to save Blade from Dracula, likely so we can play him in Season 2. Thank you all so much for listening and joining me for another wonderful video. If you like the video, drop a like, and if you want to be up to date on all Marvel Rivals lore content, go ahead and give us a subscribe here at the Question Circle. We appreciate you so much. Thank you all so much for the support on Season 0, and I'm so excited to start making Season 1 videos. Until the next time I see you all, drink some water, wash your hands, tell someone you love that you love them, and be good people. So I've been getting a question from a few different folks, which is, Why is Moon Knight seemingly trying to steal the pages of the Darkhold from Herbie in Midtown? And also, why is Moon Knight aura farming in the loading screen of that map? Let's talk about it. My name is The Riddler, wrong universe, I know, and this is Marvel Rivals Season 1, The Eternal Knights. So, our story today begins with a short recap. Doctor Strange was visited by Doom before the timed stream entanglement began, and Doom requested the Darkhold for research purposes. Doom wants to study the immortality of vampires, and if he had the Darkhold, the book that created them in the first place, he would be able to do so. Strange, however, thinks that's a terrible idea and instead locks the Book of Sins away from even himself inside a portal inside a portal. We can now see this idea in game in the Doom match map with all the many portals and repeated hallways and staircases in the Sanctum Sanctorum. We then also see Doom contact Khonshu, god of the moon and protector of nighttime travelers. Doom also tells him, hey, I want the Darkhold, though we don't know if this is the same Doom or Doom 2099, which I think is something important to keep in mind because clearly they have a lot of the same ideas. Either way, Khonshu goes, oh hell no. But Doom brings up a good point. Dracula is already brewing his plan to terrorize the city with Eternal Night. So he tells his Moon Knight to get active, and Moon Knight, being a loyalist, does just that. Meanwhile, Strange realizes that Khonshu has gotten a hold of the book somehow, but is worried because the plan Khonshu has to fix things is essentially a total cleansing of all those affected, including the innocent civilians that were simply enthralled by Dracula. Strange can't abide by this, of course, and decides to challenge Khonshu to a game of interdimensional Senet, an ancient game most similar to chess, to see who gets it. We learn from Bats the Ghost Dog that not only does the sorcerer reign supreme, but also that he did so in spectacular, albeit buzzer-beating fashion. Khonshu, however, is quite the sore loser, and while he did bet Doctor Strange the Darkhold, he didn't say anything about specific pages of the book. So Khonshu splinters and scatters the book, sending pages everywhere. Moon Knight and Iron Man, as well as Wolverine, Winter Soldier, and Psylocke, form a crew together, the Eternity Knights, who are determined to stop Dracula no matter the costs. A quick pause for a second, since we just named a few characters that we know for a fact are also elsewhere, right? It's important to keep in mind that much like with Doctor Doom, there's more than one timeline at play here, which seems obvious, like duh, right? But I think what that means is that when the story brings up Wolverine and Winter Soldier being a part of the Eternity Knights and having different skins, all of which seem to have been created by either Tony Stark using chronovium laced metals and uh, design techniques, um, it's important to keep in mind that those may be from the current timeline because the Freedom Fighter Wolverine and the Freedom Fighting Winter Soldier that we see earlier in my video, A Crack Team, those people are in 2099 working with Super Soldier Black Widow. So presumably the Wolverine Winter Soldier and possibly even the Psylocke that form the Eternity Knights are from 2024 and not 2099. Um, I am going to work under the assumption that if they aren't 2024, they are 2099. Those seem to be the two primary timelines in the game's continuity thus far. But even that is technically a guess. So anytime you hear that a character is in a place and you're like, wait, how'd they get there? Keep in mind that it might not literally be the same character and that there are different iterations of characters, usually represented by different skins in the game, in different places at different times. So when I am referring to Wolverine in the Eternity Knights, I'm talking about the Wolverine skin that we have in the current Season 2 Battle Pass. That guy is working with Moon Knight and Iron Man. Just like how that Iron Man skin is canonically the one that's flying around New York doing all of this stuff. So, just a quick clarification, because I know once we start talking about time travel, shit can get a little mixed up, so I wanted to be clear on that. Back to the story. The Fantastic Four and Squirrel Girl think that Khonshu's plan goes way too far, and thusly they are trying to collect and scan the pages of the Montesi formula so that Reed can find a more amicable solution to the Dracula problem that Manhattan's currently seeing. And this is what we're seeing in the push map. If you are helping Herbie collect the pages and trying to get back to the Baxter building, you are Team Fantastic Four. You're trying to find the Montesi formula, put it in the hands of Reed Richards, and I think Doctor Strange is also in the loading screen. And they are trying to use the Montesi formula, but modified so that it doesn't just wipe out everyone who's enthralled by Dracula currently. And if you're trying to stop Herbie and you're already in the Baxter building, that makes you Team Eternity Knights. Um, Meaning you are canonically on the side of Moon Knight, Iron Man, Wolverine, Winter Soldier, Psylocke, etc. We don't currently know which side wins, I don't believe. You can correct me in the comments down below if there's something that I'm missing in the lore. I don't have all of the gallery cards, I only have most of them. So it's possible that the last one or two says something that goes against what I'm saying now. But if they do, let me know. The interesting thing about this, I think, one of the most interesting things, is that the gallery card specifically calls out that when the Eternity Knights encounter someone in Greenwich, which is where uh, Moon Knight has one of his bases of operations, and they encounter someone leading a pack of vampires in Greenwich that is dressed in all white armor. And if you have seen this gallery card, the specific gallery card that I'm talking about is called... It's called Midnight Missions. If you look to the left, well, first of all, you can see all of the people in their various skins, right? And based on this graphic, we've already gotten this Adam Warlock skin. We've already gotten this Moon Knight skin, this Wolverine skin, and this Iron Man skin. So you have to figure we're getting this Psylocke skin, right? And we're probably going to get this Winter Soldier skin as well. Those will probably be the next two skins that drop. But if you look to who they're talking about with this white armor on, it looks like it's Blade. I mean, he has vampire ears, vampire teeth. It's like, it looks like Eric Brooks, right? But also, we can kind of see into his chest cavity. Did Dracula rip his chest open? Like, what's going on, brother? Are you okay? I don't think you are. I mean, and also, if Blade is, leading a pack of vampires for Dracula, he's clearly not okay, right? I think that means that Blade is enthralled by Dracula currently. And that's super not good, folks. That's really bad. Blade is like the guy who takes care of vampires in the Marvel Universe. So if he's enthralled by Dracula, it's not looking good. It's not looking good, champ. The Thing and Johnny Storm, we're gonna have to do some heavy lifting when they get added to the game in a few weeks, because boy, oh boy, that's not good. That is not good. But I'm rambling at this point. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to get the rest of the gallery cards so we can see what's going on. And then so we can learn how exactly all of this, where it's all headed. Because boy, oh boy, it's not looking great for our heroes. I will tell you what. But until the next time I see you all, drink some water, wash your hands, tell someone you love that you love them, and be good people. Crinovium. We've talked about this new mythical element quite a bit over the course of these videos, especially early on, but I think it's time to revisit the details and the facts and do a bit of theorizing on what we are likely to see because of Crinovium and the game mechanics that are powered by Crinovium. Let's talk about it. I'm Riddler, wrong universe, I know, and this is Marvel Rivals Season 1, The Crinovium Compendium. Let's start with a basic overview that goes over what we have already covered about chronovium. Chronovium is an element made when realities clash together as a result of the time stream entanglement. While it most frequently appears as a crystal around the size of an average humanoid's palm, it can also materialize in a state between solid and liquid similar to sleet. We also see that chronovium can manifest within metal, which is how we get the chronovibranium that we see on the Wakanda maps. We also know that it can manifest within energy itself, as shown by it embiggening the world tree Yggdrasil to obscene proportions. For those who don't know, the tree of Yggdrasil is not actually a tree, but instead a visual representation of the field of energy that permeates all 10 of the realms centered in Asgard. Subsequently, the energy fields that it permeates can transfer to the people who manipulate this energy. We know this because Thor remarks that he can feel the changes in the Odin force once chronovium is present. Loki and Hela's magics are also both greatly enhanced by chronovium. But that's not all. Chronovium can also integrate with metaphysical concepts so long as they have a physical representation. We know this because Master Weaver wants to integrate chronovium into the Web of Life and Destiny. The Web of Life and Destiny, for those who don't know, is a 3D construct in a 5-dimensional space. It was originally created by the goddess Neith to connect the destiny of certain beings together via divine totems. So, given that information, we can also assume that chronovium can influence destiny or adjacent entities who within the Marvel universe have physical avatars. I think it's not an illogical leap to also assume that things like the power cosmic, the Infinity Stones, and the Phoenix Force, etc., are all up for grabs within chronovium since it can infiltrate things of a similar tier of power. The last thing that we know for sure when it comes to chronovium is that it is powered by chronal energy. Very raw, very potent chronal energy. It is in fact so potent that it would even satiate Galactus's appetite, and we know this because Galacta has been eating chronovium, and they have the same driving hunger behind them. Considering Galactus is only temporarily sated when he eats entire planets, we can assume that these palm-sized crystals pack quite a punch, and there's a lot of energy there, and I think I may know why. But I want to go ahead and draw a clear line in the sand here. Everything I have just talked about is canon information outside of my claim about the Phoenix Force and, the power cosmic and all of those things. These are things that you can straight up look up in Marvel Rivals itself or in the Marvel Universe at large. Keep in mind that the game is canon and this is a real timeline that is really happening. What are we going to talk about from here forward? We're going to talk about ideas I have and speculation based on what we've seen so far. I just want to be clear, the first about 2.5 minutes of this video is all canon information. Those things are factual, they are true. And everything that I'm about to talk about here forward are just logical assumptions that I'm making that I think have some merit to them. I think I'm right about the things that I'm mentioning, but we won't know for sure until it either happens or doesn't happen. So chronovium is inherently powerful, right? Like really strong. And I think the reason for that is actually kind of dark. Chronovium is created when realities bash together. So what if chronovium is the leftover time of destroyed realities given physical form? In Storm's story, we see Krakoa and Arako begin to meld together, but it's not a perfect fusion. They aren't going to harmoniously fuse and become one. They're being violently smashed together, and bits of them are disappearing as they are replaced by their counterparts. What if all of those odd angles and pieces that get basically shunted off during the process, what happens to them? We know that matter can't be destroyed, so they have to go somewhere, right? I think they become chronovium. Based on Shuri, Reed Richards, and Tony Stark's research, chronovium seems to form in places of extreme power and importance. What if the reason for that is when realities merge together, their most cosmically potent forces collide with each other and fragment into pieces? The reality that disappears literally breaks into crystalline chunks that get left over in the fused realities. For folks who don't know, vibranium was not always in Wakanda. It fell to Earth from a meteor millions of years ago, which is partially why Wakanda went to space to try and find its origins. Chronovium also began to spontaneously manifest within vibranium. I can't see that being a coincidence. Another thing that I'm theorizing is why can people like Frank Castle and Mantis and the rest go toe to toe with characters like Thor and Adam Warlock and Hela? First, let's be clear about a few things. Adam Warlock is insanely powerful, immortal, and he's one of the few beings that, with no assistance, can totally resist the powers of the Soul Stone. He can heal people from fatal wounds with the snap of his fingers. Mantis is a telepathic empath. Now, that's a bit reductive of Mantis's accomplishments, and you get what I mean. Why can she fight and have a similar health pool to someone like Adam Warlock? I think the answer is Chronovium. But D, you say, we've never seen Mantis or Frank Castle get laced with Chronovium. I don't think we need to. There's no corner of the multiverse that wasn't affected by the time stream entanglement. Even pocket dimensions like Kunlun were pulled into it. The only people we see that actively acknowledge Chronovium at all when it comes to enhancing their powers are Thor and Storm. But both of these exceptions make total sense. Storm can feel weather phenomena down to her cells. There are some comic books where even if she tries, she can't ignore noticing light changes in the weather around her. So a storm of time would be very acutely felt by her and would thusly stand out to her. But think about when you stand in the rain. If you weren't wet by the end of it, if something dried you off before you actually went into a place that wasn't raining, the only thing you would probably feel is a brief sensation of cold. And I think that's how it felt to everyone else. Mantis probably just got a random shiver up her spine and didn't really think twice about it. I mean, the immortal Iron Fist was in Kunlun and was largely completely unaware of anything that was happening until it was explained to him, even though he knew that Kunlun had fused with the other cities of heaven. I think this is not a thing that everyone knew happened when it happened. I think there was just a wave of weird energy, a shiver up their spine, and they were like, what the hell was that? And then they kind of moved on. Thor, as another example, has felt the Odin Force since he was a child. He's felt it almost as consistently as he's felt the Thor Force. And he's wielded the Odin Force for hundreds and hundreds of years. If something was different about it, especially from such an experienced warrior's position, if it were stronger, no less, Thor would notice immediately. So, back to the main point then. I think the reason we have all these heroes able to go toe to toe with each other is because Chronovium stabilizes the playing field. It brings everyone roughly within range of each other as far as combat goes. And more specifically, I think it's why the characters are respawning. If you listen to a lot of the dialogue in Marvel Rivals, when people speak of the heroes that go down, they talk about them like they're dying. There are many lines from both allies and the people who kill you that reference the fact that they just killed you, like you are supposed to be dead. So, how do these people keep coming back? I think it's because the Chronovium within them senses that they are about to die, and at the last second, it rewinds their time, their personal time, back to a predetermined place at full power and full HP. And before anyone says it, yes, obviously the real reason for these things is that we're playing a video game. I know. But diegetically, like in the actual mechanics and like in universe for the game, I think this is the explanation. The last thing I want to cover is what does Chronovium mean for the future? Firstly, like I've done a few times in my videos, I think that it's Phoenix Force evidence. The Phoenix Force is quite literally an energy field on the scale and magnitude, if not a bit larger, comparably to Yggdrasil. So if Cronovium can fuse with the Great Tree and empower that, you have to assume it can do the same for the Phoenix Force. It would be strange if it couldn't, and it will probably empower Jean Grey even further. Historically, in the comic books, Jean usually does not have control of the Phoenix Force. It's kind of a thing that takes control over her. So they might take an angle where Jean can actually control a fragment of the Phoenix Force better than she normally would be able to, thanks to the assistance of Cronovium. Perhaps Cronovium will not make the Phoenix Force more powerful, but it will empower Jean to wield the Phoenix Force more consciously. And again, before we get into it, yes, I know there are comic books where Jean Grey is in full control of the Phoenix Force. I am aware, but generally, she cannot control it of her own accord. So if she has Cronovium, perhaps she'll be more up to the challenge. Who knows? Another very interesting one that I imagined is Terrigen Mist. The Inhumans have Terrigen Mist in almost every appearance. It's pretty crucial to how the Inhumans work. It's sort of a rough equivalent to the X gene, if there was such a thing for the Inhumans. And I could very easily see Cronovium lacing Terrigen Mist and putting some of the weaker Inhumans on the level of Thor and such, and some of the stronger Inhumans don't really need the power boost, but it's a good excuse. Maybe that would be the reason why Black Bolt can talk, because Cronovium actually gives him control of his voice or something. It could be anything really, which I think is part of the beauty of creating their own version of unobtainium, but we'll talk about that in a second. And of course, this is all if Marvel decides to stop trying to erase the Inhumans and the concept of Inhumans from existence, which they've been doing for the past couple of years, where we're just slowly trying to act like the Inhumans are not and were never a thing and they just never appear again. But hey, who knows? Chronovium could also be used for something as simple as enhancing Elektra and her sigh, give Blade a bitching sword or 1,000 other things, which is almost certainly why NetEase decided to have Chronovium exist in the first place. I've seen a couple of people mention that adamantium and vibranium, like, why can't we just use those? There are a million different super elements that exist in the Marvel Universe. And I think it's clear that it's because they're telling a different story. And to make all of the pieces fit how they want them to, they need a special element that they can define the limits of, because they know where they want to take it. If they say what Chronovium can and can't do, then they can make kind of any characters that they want to, so long as they fit within their own rules. And then maybe we'll run into some characters who are historically unaffected by time, like Ghost Rider and the Spirits of Vengeance. And it's like, oh yeah, Chronovium, this basically means nothing to me. I can kind of do whatever I want. That would be cool too. Some rules are set up and established simply to be broken. That is the nature of comic books. And I think one of the most exciting things about this game to me is that they are so dedicated to making it feel like the comic books. I love the MCU. I have similar thoughts to most people on the MCU, where I liked it a lot more in its earlier years, and now I've sort of tapered off for it. So I'm really glad to see Marvel Rivals taking a very comic book centric approach to this game, and I think Chronovium has a lot to do with that. Um, but yes, that is all I have for you today. This one was a little more rambly and a lot less written out than most of my other videos. But thank you for sticking around with me. If you like the video, like the video. Give us a subscribe if you don't mind helping our climb to 500 subs. We just recently crossed 100. Thank you all so much. And comment down below and let me know what you think of everything. If you have any theories about Chronovium, how it's going to work, what it's going to be in the future, and if we'll see it in some other properties. Maybe a different video game will come out and you can get like a collectible that's a little Chronovium token. Who knows? Maybe we'll see it in other places, because like I said earlier, this game's canon. These things actually fucking happen. So it'd be cool to see Chronovium pop up somewhere else. It'll probably be a long time down the line, which hopefully we'll have this game for many years to come. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. And until the next time I see you, drink some water, wash your hands, tell someone you love that you love them, and be good people. And that's it. Thank you all so much for joining me on this almost 2 hour long journey. I appreciate you listening to everything that I have to say, and I'm so excited for the second half of Marvel Rivals. It's been an absolute blast covering this game, and I plan to continue in the future as we get more and more characters and as we get more and more lore bits. Yeah, I can't wait to see what is next. And thank you all for joining me. Remember, if you like the video, drop us a subscribe. We're on our way to 500.